Hello, and welcome to A Bird's Eye View. In this series, we'll be discussing everything school bus related from the perspective of a leading school bus manufacturer. I'm Brad Beauchamp, Alternative Fuels Manager at Bluebird.
I'm Steve Whaley, Business Development at Bluebird. We're going to discuss my favorite topic, all things propane this season.
And I'm Albert Burleigh, Vice President of Alternative Fuels for Bluebird. So let's hop on the bus and let's get started.
Welcome to A Bird's Eye View. In this episode, we'll be discussing EV and propane, a symbiotic relationship. And I've got two experts here, Albert Burleigh and Ryan Zick. Albert, so we know obviously EVs get all the attention right now, and we know that EV and propane are both, from an emission standpoint, what comes out of the bus, better than gas or diesel, right?
Yep.
So tell me a little bit about the relationship between what we build in EV and propane. I know we build a little bit of everything, right?
We do, yeah. We can offer all fuel types that are available in school buses today at Bluebird. So gas, diesel, propane, and EV. And you're right, EV is getting a lot of the attention. Obviously, there's a lot of growth in the whole EV world right now, automotive starting much earlier now in school bus as well. And a lot of the funding that is available today through the federal government is geared, primarily to EV, which has drawn a lot of attention to it. It's a great product. We've been selling it now since 2018 and have sold over 1,500 so far. We have in operation. So, you hear a lot about EV. You read a lot about it. A lot of schools are looking at it. But really, if you think about it, propane has been around for quite a long time and is also another very clean fuel. It's not zero emission, but it's very close to no emissions product. So for us, it's a great offering for school districts. For those who are either not ready to go EV or maybe EV doesn't meet all their needs in their fleet, propane's a great option.
So Ryan, it sounds like both EV and propane are good options. Does that mean those are the two clear winners?
It's crazy to think that the industry, school bus in general, right? We went from a time not that long ago where it was diesel and diesel only, and now they probably have more choice than just about anybody, which is good, right? The customer wins when they have choice. And an industry friend of mine put it this way, right? There's no silver bullet, when we talk about EV or propane or natural gas or hydrogen, but there's a ton of silver BBs. So I think if you look at, the attributes of the fuels, how they operate, what kind of conditions, where do they excel and where do they struggle, we can see more of this composite fleet of the future, where we use one fuel source for something and another for another application, and we look at where we get to our common goal using all the different tools we have at our disposal.
Aha, so it's the aha moment of, wow, there's more than just one fuel, yet the vehicle's the same, right? It carries students to and from school, it's yellow, everything about it's the same, but it can run on different fuels.
Absolutely.
That's a good point. If you think about it, we build a school bus, we still build them as safe regardless of what fuel type it's being powered by. So school districts often want to know that, right? What's the main differences? It's just what propels it down the road. Primarily, operation of it is going to be very similar, if not exactly the same, depending on the fuel type. Not a lot of differences.
So we know in the gas and diesel world, there's 140 to 170,000 places that you can refuel that vehicle. How does that play out with the EV and the propane side?
For EV, for obviously this charging infrastructure, but because of route needs and because those buses come back to the yard every day, most have their own charging infrastructure on site. Where propane, because you have more range and you also have more options to actually fuel it publicly. Most school districts do have their own fueling infrastructure on site, but they can also find many places to fuel it while going on, longer trips or activities or what have you at school districts. So
I think on the propane side too, the refueling times are pretty quick, similar to what you'd expect of a gas or a diesel bus. So, the commitment to refuel that bus all the way isn't quite the same as what it would be on some of the other alternative fuels.
So you really do have the same ease of keeping the vehicle fueled and ready to go with EV and propane that you do with the traditional diesel, as Ryan had mentioned, and even gasoline.
Yep.
So cost. Let's talk about the EV and propane symbiotic relationship as it relates to cost.
Yeah, obviously a big difference there. And that is the one big challenge, or one of the big challenges with EV, and maybe why it hasn't grown nearly as fast as propane has grown, because there is that initial cost that is quite a bit more, 2 to 3 times more than a typical internal combustion engine bus. So because of that, you have to have typically some type of incentives or subsidies to help offset that upfront cost. Now your operational costs are much, much lower, very little maintenance. Energy costs are a lot less than fueling costs, but it's still, you have to kind of get over that hump of the initial cost of just purchasing the bus, which is why things like federal grants or state level grants are generally required for school districts to actually put these in operation. Where propane, not so much the case. You don't really need any kind of incentives.
A lot closer to the price of a traditional fuel bus. I mean, I would say on average, under $10,000 as the price delta between the status quo, the diesel or the gasoline bus up to a propane. And there's also a reduced cost per mile. EV is the lowest cost per mile typically when you look at it. The acquisition cost is the part that offsets it. And on the propane side, you got this really good balance of a very low upfront acquisition price, right, and a low cost per mile that gets you a great total cost of ownership.
So talk to me a little bit about could these two actual propane and EV buses exist in the same fleet?
Yeah, I definitely think they could, and you're starting to see school districts, even on some of these like EPA grants, where they're applying actually for both products, for propane and for EV, because schools see really the benefit of both, right, and some of the limitations of EV where they don't have with propane. So yeah, you're going to have to figure out the infrastructure side. Obviously for EV, you're going to have charging infrastructure, and there's a process for that. And also on propane, they're going to have their own fueling infrastructure there as well, which is a lot easier, honestly, than the charging side for school buses. So, but I definitely think they could both exist in the same fleets.
I think we're going to see it a lot. I think if you put that hat on for a while of a transportation director, school board, you name it, right? What's the common goal? Well, I'm trying to get kids to and from school, but now I need to do it more sustainably, right? I'm being asked to watch how we're impacting the environment in our fleet. And both, as you said, EV and propane help achieve that goal, but they do it and excel in different areas. And so there's certain parts of the country, right, which are colder than others. Propane excels and really loves the cold, thrives in it really. EV prefers the warmer areas. EV really likes urban routes, low speed, right, where we probably idle and consume more fuel than necessary. We might like more rural routes because of range or something like that. So when you look at all the different routes that a school district might manage, they could probably start seeing those pieces of, oh, that technology should go here, and we should put this one over there. But there's a place for both of them. And that fleet could be optimized in that way.
So they both can play together. It sounds like they can definitely be part of a fleet depending upon the needs, whether it's a long trip bus or something that's just short in an urban route. When it relates to, I'll say, infrastructure for going to the future, both of them have different things to consider, right? Obviously, an EV, as Albert had mentioned, it's putting in a charging station. Propane, it's often working with your local propane provider to give you the equipment to be able to fuel the bus. If I'm a contractor or a district, how do I get started on that? How do I make the decision whether I just fuel outside? And a lot of districts have gotten rid of even their gas and diesel islands, and they basically contract out. How do I get started on making the decisions on infrastructure?
Well, talking about this, symbiotic relationship, there's a cool overlap between the two specifically. So propane is commonly used in power generation applications, has been for many, many years. And so somebody came up with a great idea of, if we have electrical infrastructure needs that are going through the roof, right, because of all the electric vehicles out there, could we use propane as power generation for those battery chargers? So you think about that composite fleet of the future, and I've got propane buses and I've got EV buses. I've got propane already on site because I'm fueling those. So I've got stored energy there. And if I use a generator, not only can I make myself more resilient, I can charge my buses if the grid goes down, I could fuel my propane buses if the grid goes down, and I could take the whole fleet in a more resilient step and direction than less. Really cool concept between those. And we're seeing some of that happen with some of the fleets that have both in their operation.
Yeah, I think we'll see more of that too, because it really solves those problems, like you're saying, like resiliency, and if the grid goes down, or if there's natural disasters. All those concerns with school districts today that have their own fueling island and can't get fuel out of their, out of that to actually fuel their buses. With this solution, obviously it solves all those issues, and you still have the great performance of two different fuel types.
And I think too, the optics of backing up your electric buses with a big diesel generator. We all know diesel's pretty clean, but there is that piece of it that's like, well, couldn't you just run a diesel bus in the first place? So we get propane extremely clean from a tailpipe perspective, and it backs up your fleet totally.
So it sounds like the two, both on the vehicle side and on the infrastructure side, can actually play well together. So if somebody wanted to go all EV today, right? And when we're getting requests like that, where I just want to go all EV bus, and you were to give them guidance or perspective, how does propane play in that? Say it's a all diesel fleet today. How does propane play in that? I want to do all EV.
Yeah, that's a great question. We get those questions too, because some school districts are ready to go all in on EV, and they're trying to electrify their fleet. And there's, of course, challenges with doing that. The cost factor we talked about earlier, but there's also some other considerations like range and just how quickly can you make that transition, right? So for me, it seems like propane is that natural bridge to get to a fully sustainable zero-emission fleet. If you can't do it all today or do it in the time frame you're wanting to, I think propane is a great solution.
I think so too, and I think that fleet that's all in on EV, that setting the expectations with them up front of let's look at all your routes and let's make sure that makes sense and you're going to have a positive experience. Because there could be a few out there that run those higher miles and it's less predictable, and that might be where the propane fits, and they just don't see that fit because we're still relatively in the infancy of EV adoption. And so the expectations of the fleet might be, well, this can go 200 or 300 miles, or it can have that higher range, where that might have a more natural fit with propane. They're just not aware of the differences of the vehicles themselves.
So there's really some educating to do as it relates to those that, let's say, are nearly, if not all, diesel today, and trying to make that bridge to eventually what would be an EV economy if everything kept tracking the way it's tracking today.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's just going and sitting down with the customer and fully assessing their fleet, their route needs, what their operation looks like today, what it's going to look like in the future, and come up with a solution that may involve both propane and EV to make it work.
And I mean, we talk about, propane being a bridge fuel, right? I still am not sure we know what the destination is, right? We could see hydrogen more. There could be a fuel source none of us even know about, right? But it's that common goal of we want to take a step toward cleaner, but still get the job done, right? Because ultimately we still have to get these kids to and from school safely and reliably. And that composite fleet can do that for just about every application that I've seen across the country.
So what you're saying is, hey, we've been doing this diesel thing for a long time. And I know in some cases districts and contractors are looking at how am I going to make this change to these more emissions friendly EVs and how does propane play in that? You're saying it's a long bridge. It could be a long bridge.
I think it could be a very long bridge.
Yeah, and that's okay, right?
Yeah. Thank you again for talking about the EV and propane symbiotic relationship. It really sounds like from an overall perspective that the two can really work together to help a contractor or school district get to a cleaner fleet. And sounds like it can be easy to implement and cost effective as well.
Yeah, and I think school districts, this is all top of mind, right? They understand they're going to likely have to do something different here in the very near future, and they want to know the best path to do that. So, yeah.
And that's a bird's eye view on the symbiotic relationship between EV and propane.